Trump's direction, Treasury is expanding its efforts to identify organizations that abuse charitable and nonprofit structures as vehicles for illicit finance. We are examining where tax-exempt status has been exploited, where charitable entities have become financial conduits for foreign influence activity, and how those entrusted with stewardship of these organizations have instead enabled violence. Where the evidence leads, we will not hesitate to follow. And of course, we will hold these organizations, officers, directors accountable. And just as financial institutions must know their clients, they must know their grantees. That work is well underway.
For over 50 years, George Soros has operated the single most powerful private political machine on the face of the earth, funding regime changes, funding riots, funding the takedown of a sitting American president, and doing it all in part with your tax dollars. Until now. The Trump administration has officially begun the process of permanently dismantling the tentacles of Soros' empire, along with a number of other left-wing NGOs, and you won't believe who Trump has tapped to do it, but it's someone with inside knowledge of how these organizations run, and he's the perfect person to bring the Soros empire to its final and decisive end. Greetings, everyone. It is Livestream Friday. I'm your host, Dr. Steve. You're a Patriot Professor. You're never late, Patriot Professor. I was reading some of those comments. A wizard is never late. I'm here right when I'm supposed to be, right? Whatever it is. I'm here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis. You're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. As always, our super chats are up, so feel free to send in your comments, your questions throughout the broadcast. It will be my privilege and my honor to answer them right here on this live stream. Also, a quick programming note. My Civ Cosm Masterclass is filling up fast. We start September 8th in just over a week. And if this is your first time hearing about it, I'm teaching a deep dive masterclass on my latest book, Civ Cosm, Gods, Algorithms, and the Rise of a Civilizational Cosmocracy. It's been my project for the last 3 years to give you a comprehensive overall frame for the new world that's rising all around us with the death of the liberal globalist order and the end of the Soros empire that's going down with it. What world replaces it? That's precisely the question I answer in Civ Cosm. The world that's rising is an intersection between three grand worldwide dynamics: theopolitics, with the return of religion to the public square and the rise of what are called civilization states; technopolitics, with the rise of new technologies serving as expressions of civilizational power; and astropolitics, where those expressions are increasingly extending beyond our own planet into power competitions over the cosmos itself. That's what the rise of a civilizational cosmocracy is all about. And if you want a front row seat on it, if you want to be, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, on the cutting edge of societal evolution, right? Oh gosh, I miss Rush. Then you will definitely want to sign up for this amazing 6-week masterclass. We'll go over the whole Civ Cosm framework live, virtually for 6 weeks. You get to ask me your questions straight from the book. Today only, when you click on that link or scan the QR code, for the next 24 hours only, use code CivCosm30. CivCosm30. And at checkout, you're going to get $30 off the essential or the complete bundle. CivCosm30. Tomorrow, the code's gone. So you only got 24 hours. So scan the QR code, click the link, and I can't wait to see you for this live masterclass. It's going to be absolutely awesome. I'm very, very excited. All right, let's dive right in here. This is awesome. The New York Post is now reporting from 3 separate sources familiar with internal Treasury deliberations that none other than Scott Bessent and the IRS are actively drawing up plans to revoke once and for all the tax-exempt status of George Soros's Open Society Foundations. The organization that has functioned for decades as the financial engine of the entire global left is now staring down the loss of its 501c3 tax status, which means the loss of the single greatest tax shelter the political left has ever built. And it's not just Soros. The same reporting names the Southern Poverty Law Center and CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, again, another far-left activist front, as sitting right alongside Soros in the crosshairs of this crackdown. Now, according to the Post, Bessent's inner circle has been drafting a formal blueprint that would strip these organizations of their charitable status altogether. It would literally financially destroy them. And here's the number. I mean, this is the number that every single one should make all of us sit up. Soros's network, SPLC, and CARE all lose their exemptions. That would mean that for when it comes to Soros's organization, roughly $165 million would suddenly be owed to the United States Treasury in back taxes. Actually, it's 165 million total for all of them. 163 comes directly from Soros's network alone. So this would be catastrophic. This would be dismantling par excellence. Soros isn't just one name on this list. He is the list. If it's a total of 165 million back taxes, it's $165 million back taxes, and 163 is Soros. This is a Soros obliteration par excellence. So what's going on here? It's pretty amazing stuff because it all leans on an executive order that President Trump signed back in 2025, targeting nonprofits that operate with what the order calls a, quote, substantial illegal purpose. Okay, substantial illegal purpose. And what that means is that it gives the Treasury and the IRS the legal authority to go after tax-exempt organizations, no matter how sacrosanct, like CARE or like Soros's organizations, the Open Societies Foundations. They have all the authority in the world to go after these organizations they suspect of basically being fronts for nefarious activity. So these organizations depict themselves in their name and their legal documentation as philanthropic humanitarian organizations. But in point of fact, behind the scenes, they're actually tied to all kinds of political violence, radical ideologies, regime change operations, or any other activity that has literally nothing to do whatsoever with their supposed charity work. One source, speaking anonymously to the New York Post, put it perfectly. They compared the Treasury Department right now as a dog with a bone, saying that any organization currently out of compliance is on borrowed time. Scott Bessent is laser focused on crushing these organizations at the direction of President Trump. Other sources did admit that the IRS was moving way too slowly for Trump on this on purpose. Unfortunately, there's still some entrenched forces in there, but the Post is reporting that that's about to change very, very soon. They got this. They got all the people they want in charge of this. Everything is converging in such a way so as to begin speeding up what promises to be an absolutely devastating crackdown on these organizations. Now, of course, the usual suspects are already lawyering up. A left-leaning group called Project Democracy has actually filed a lawsuit against the Treasury Department and the IRS, claiming the entire crackdown is just political retribution, retaliation, dressed up as tax enforcement and the like, haha. And a spokesperson for the Open Society Foundations gave a statement calling this, quote, an illegal attempt to target and stifle the wonderful work that this administration, this evil administration disagrees with. Okay, that wasn't quite a quote. I did put in a few extra adjectives in there, but I mean, of course they'd say that, right? When your entire billion-dollar empire is built on tax-exempt status, tax-exempt donations, funding partisan warfare and crooked DAs and regime change operations around the world, you're going to find anything you possibly get. You're going to scream political persecution the second someone finally opens up the books. I'm surprised they haven't played the race card by this point right now. I'm sure CARE is about to, the American Islamic Relations organization there. But Here's what's so fascinating and unfortunately so futile for them. The Trump administration is already treating this as a done deal. There's no way around this. They're as guilty as sin, and they're not going to be able to weasel their way out of this with some kind, racial, retaliation rhetoric or anything like that. There are now reports that Trump's own team inside the Treasury are at this point just merely debating strategy. They're not debating ends. The ends is to destroy the Soros network. The outcome is guaranteed. The outcome is baked into the cake. It's just a matter of what kind of cake do you want to make. It's a matter of strategy. So some officials want a big chunk of this crackdown wrapped up in the next several weeks before the midterms. Others are more cautious because they're worried that going after Soros and the SPLC too fast before finishing the case of foreign linked groups like CARE, that could tie up the whole thing in years of litigation. But what's so key here to understand and what's really happening here inside the administration, there is a genuine tactical debate on how hard and how fast to swing the hammer, but nobody inside the building is debating whether to swing the hammer. That's already been decided. Soros is going down. The question is simply now how to do it most effectively. Interesting, we heard J.D. Vance say something very similar with Ilhan Omar. Do you remember that? I mean, Vance basically came out and said, didn't he say Ilhan Omar or something like that? I forgot. But Ilhan Omar has, we have determined, has definitely committed immigration fraud. Now the question is just best how to handle this. How are we going to go about this? But we are going to bring her to some kind of accountability. It's the same thing. Trump is all about dropping the hammer. The question is, what's the best way to do it? This isn't some isolated tax dispute either. That's another thing to get. This is the post-millennials actually reporting that this fits into a much broader pattern because the Treasury's target list doesn't stop with Soros or the SPLC or CARE. We're also hearing that groups like the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, the Racial Equity Group, Media Justice, a whole host of other nonprofits, they're all being scrutinized as part of this same sweep. So this is basically a nuclear blast that's going on here. This is a systematic dismantling of the entire nonprofit left-wing industrial complex that the American left built over decades to fund itself outside the normal democratic process. And Soros's network sits, of course, right at the center of this globalist web. Now, what you have to understand is how systematic this dismantling is. What Bessent and the Treasury Department are doing comes on the heels, of course, of what Elon Musk and Doge did some months back with USAID and a number of Soros-linked organizations. You have to understand they're already bleeding. They're already bleeding profusely. This will be the coup de grace. This will be, as it were, the kill shot. We have to remember the bleeding started with the annihilation, in effect, of USAID. We have to appreciate just how much of our tax dollars actually funneled to George Soros's Open Society Foundation. It was staggering, the amount of money. It turns out USAID had been bankrolled. Again, if you want to take a step back, take a step away from the panicans, the podcast panicans. Trump never kept any of his promises. You want to take a step back and just recall how much the world has changed since what you did back in November 2024. We have to remember that USAID was bankrolling Soros's organizations to the tune of over $250 million. Yes, billion with a B. $270 million over the course of 15 years. You and I, our federal tax dollars, were funding George Soros to the tune of over $250 million. According to a report by the Heritage Foundation, It was the Obama administration that designated Soros as a main recipient of USAID monies in order to fund far-left causes all over the world. Again, using your tax dollars. Here's an example of how those funds, again, our money, were used to radically impact the geopolitical order, like literally enacting a regime change in Ukraine. This is going back to 2014. This instigated the Maidan Revolution. This is where the Russia-Ukraine war started in 2014. Okay, this is where it all started. We've talked about that endlessly on this channel. We've analyzed the effects of the Maidan Revolution in influencing what happened in February 2022. So this is Soros himself admitting his role in that 2014 Maidan Revolution. Take a look.
One of the things that many people recognized about you was that you, during the revolutions of 1989, funded a lot of dissident activity, civil society groups in Eastern Europe, in Poland, the Czech Republic. Are you doing similar things in Ukraine?
Well, I set up a foundation in Ukraine before Ukraine became independent of Russia. And the foundation has been functioning ever since. And it played an important part in events now.
Ukraine.
We also were able to have good discussions with the leadership there about how to restart agriculture and improve energy efficiency using this new model of partnering with companies. And we had George Soros was there too, so we engaged in some of the efforts with him.
And if you thought funding regime change in Ukraine that ended up becoming a geopolitical nightmare many years later, if you thought that was as far as the corruption went, think again. You're not going to like this. Again, I want you to remember how much the world has changed since November of 2024, okay? You and I actually ended up paying in part for the Democrats' attempt at regime change here at home. According to the Daily Signal, Soros' Open Societies Foundations bankrolled a news organization that actually inspired the first impeachment of President Trump. A news article published by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, a news outlet that received fundings from both Soros' Open Society Foundations as well as USAID directly, was cited 4 times by the original whistleblower who came out to claim that President Trump had abused his powers by threatening to withhold military aid to Ukraine in order to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. So both USAID and Soros funds were indeed behind the first impeachment, which means, if you think it through, sorry to pour a little salt on the wound, you and I paid for that impeachment. Our tax dollars through both those sources, USAID and Open Society Foundations, were used to frame President Trump. It's beyond insane. They don't even use their own money to do it. They use ours. And it gets worse. Remember the BLM riots in the summer of 2020? Yep, Soros. USAID gave nearly $25 million to the Tide Center, a Soros-funded group, which in turn funneled millions to BLM in 2020, all as they were burning down our cities. Again, we were paying for this. And it gets even worse. Soros was given hundreds of millions of dollars of our tax money to not just fund ultra left-wing causes around the world, but of course to bankroll radical Democrats here at home. Democrats made sure Soros's foundations were flooded with cash to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and those foundations in turn funneled money right back into the coffers of the Democrats, and not just Democrats, but some of the most radical left-wing candidates in the nation. The DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, is basically a Soros creation when all's said and done. Basically, at least tacitly. Now, of course, thankfully, because of what you did in November 2024, Soros's gravy train has come to an end. All, not some, not most, all that USAID money is gone. It's all dried up. Our tax dollars are not being used for left-wing causes anymore, to fund left-wing causes. When President Trump, through DOGE, shut down USAID, he didn't just close an obscure federal agency. He severed the single largest taxpayer-funded artery feeding Soros's empire. And Soros's organizations went into an immediate tailspin. They went into a very public panic. They cut nearly 40% of their global workforce. They abandoned their operations across the European Union entirely. And then in almost comedic desperation, I kid you not, even after abandoning their operations across the European Union, they ended up turning around and asking Brussels, the heart of the European Union, to bail them out. That's how desperate they got. Soros went from fleecing U.S. taxpayers to now fleecing European taxpayers. So he's literally shopping for support. So think about the sequence there. First, Trump cuts off the USAID pipeline. Soros's empire starts bleeding out. And now months later, Besant is finishing the job along with the IRS, moving in for what could be the final blow, the coup de grace, as they call it, stripping away the domestic tax shelter that let Soros operate his political machine virtually tax-free inside our own borders for decades. So those aren't two separate stories. This is one long, coordinated, methodical, comprehensive campaign to permanently cut Soros off from both foreign aid money and domestic tax privileges at the exact same time. And the idea is the Open Societies Foundation will simply not be able to survive that 1-2 punch. It cannot. If it's not getting in the tax dollars and if it's not allowing whatever donors remain to write off those donations, they're shot. But it gets even better because there's a reason Scott Bessent in particular was tapped by Trump for this job to issue the coup de grace, as they say, the decisive blow to end Soros. If you don't know the particular inside knowledge that Scott Bessent has with Soros, this is going to absolutely blow you away. But first, gang, if you are just joining us, come on in. Love having you here. Reminder, our super chats are up, so feel free to send in your comments, your questions. It'd be my absolute honor and to answer them. Honor and my privilege to answer them right here on this live stream. Also, I hear people say all the time, Dr. Steve, I think I'm going to wait to invest in gold. The price is way up here. I'm going to wait for it to come down a little bit. I'm going to wait for the inflation to settle. I'm going to wait for the economy to stabilize. Wait until things feel a little bit more normal. Wait. But here's my question. How is all that waiting beforehand? How's it done for you, right? And seriously, what are you waiting for? I mean, you see the likes of the wealthy all around the world. They ain't waiting. Look at the economic reality around us. Central banks around the world are gobbling up gold. Nations continue looking for alternatives to their dependence on the U.S. dollar. And we're watching an increasingly fragmented global economy take shape right in front of us. These aren't isolated headlines. These are structural changes. And we've been talking a lot about these trends in this channel for years. So when someone tells me, I'm going to wait for the right time to buy up gold, I think you're still focused on the wrong thing. There is no right. It's always the right time was yesterday. The second right time is now because of debt, currency concerns, central bank buying, geopolitical uncertainty. If those are all the reasons that you were considering physical gold in the first place, what's changed? That's the question. What's changed? Not whether you perfectly timed the price. Who cares about that? Not whether gold is higher today than it was a year ago. Of course it is. Have the fundamental reasons for owning gold gone away? From where I sit, not even remotely. So that's why people are still looking at purchasing physical gold and silver directly, while others are exploring whether a gold IRA makes sense for a portion of their retirement savings. And if you're looking into either one of those, get educated first. And no one is going to educate you better than Augusta Precious Metals. Their experienced education team will sit down with you one-on-one to explain physical gold and silver. They'll walk you through how a gold IRA works, answer your questions, and help you understand your options before you make a decision. Go to turleybuysgold.com or you text Turley, Turley, to 35052. That's 35052 to request Augusta's free guide, because waiting only makes sense if you're waiting for something fundamental to change. But debt is still climbing. Central banks are still gobbling up gold. The global order is still shifting. The reasons for owning gold haven't changed, not one bit. Click on that link below right now. All right. Many of you, I'm sure, know Susan Kokinda of Promethean Updates. I know you've brought up a lot of her work before. She's very insightful foreign policy analyst. She was just on with our good friend of this channel, Stephen Gardner, and she had a fascinating insight into precisely what Scott Bessent in particular, why he was tapped by President Trump to crush none other than George Soros.
Final thing that Scott Bessent said in his press conference yesterday, where he was asked by a reporter, well, why are you giving these other countries the time to disentangle? Why aren't you just slapping them with these sanctions right off the bat? And Bessent said, what do you want me to do? Collapse the entire world financial system? Now that's very interesting, because what is he saying? He's saying that this whole underground financial black economy, which we all know overlaps with Hong Kong, with the City of London, with the Cayman Islands and the other offshore functions. You've got a gray or a black economy, which is really how the globalist system works fundamentally. It works above governments, above regulation, and some of it is just plain criminal and illegal activity. He's basically saying, as we shut off the spigots in terms of what Iran has been able to use, if we did that all at once, that could bring down the entire world financial system. That's telling me that this administration understands just how criminal the existing globalist financial system is, and that when you go after it, you don't just bring it down on everybody's head, but you go after it in a very targeted, a very strategic way. It's like defusing a bomb. And I think that's why Scott Bessent was chosen by Donald Trump. He knows how the bombs were created when he worked for George Soros, for example, and he knows how to defuse the bombs, i.e., how do you unwind this kind of criminal financial activity, which intersects the entire world financial system.
There's so much there. She's wonderful. But fundamentally, Scott Bessent was specifically chosen for this role because of, not despite, his history working directly for George Soros himself. This is where I have always parted company from so many on our side that always seem to default on the conspiratorial interpretation of what's happening in the world today. Yes, there are elites who are conspiring. I don't want to take anything away from that. But conspiratorial interpretations can often miss very strategic moves that the Trump administration is doing. Scott Bessent was probably Trump's least popular cabinet pick. I don't know if you remember this. This was going on right after he was elected, and then it was announced even before he was inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. But he had tapped Scott Bessent as his Treasury Secretary, and all of a sudden, all the conspiracists were saying, hey, do you know what he just did? He just betrayed us because he tapped into a partner at the Soros Fund Management. And Scott Bessent was a partner at Soros Fund Management for years. And I could still remember so many doomer podcasters accusing Trump of selling out to the globalists. As absurd as that sounds. He was selling out to the globalists when he nominated Bessent for his cabinet. He was selling out to he's selling out to Davos. I mean, it's so utterly preposterous when you think about those accusations. But nevertheless, they were repeated verbatim. These accusations of Trump selling out did not start with Iran, gang. It may have for some in Podcastistan, but for most of the conspiracy crowd, it started with Scott Bessent. Bessent worked for Soros. Bessent had the inside with the Davos crowd. And the only frame that these conspiracy kooks, as Trump used to call them, the only frame that they could come up with when Trump appointed Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary is that Trump sold out to Soros and the WEF. That's the only thing they could come up with. Thank God for people like Susan Kokinda, because she just nailed precisely why Trump tapped a former Soros employee. It's exactly the same rationale that Trump used for himself. Do you remember in 2016 when he was running and he was asked point blank, did you write checks to Democrats? Did you write campaign contribution checks to Democrats like Hillary Clinton? Didn't you? I mean, this is what both the media and his Republican primary opponents were both trying to stick him with. You're not a Republican. We have signed checks. You wrote checks to Hillary Clinton. You wrote checks to Ed Koch. You wrote checks to Democrats. And Trump, rather than going, he looked at straight in the camera and said, "You bet your ass I did. I wrote millions of dollars of checks for all kinds of Democrats, especially in Manhattan, because I know how the system works. I know how the system works because I was part of that system. But I'm the most dangerous person to that system imaginable because now I'm not. I'm going to use my knowledge of how the system works to crush it." That's Scott Bessent. That's exactly why Trump tapped Scott Bessent. He knows how the bombs were created because he helped build them alongside Soros, which means he now knows how to defuse the bombs. He understands from the inside exactly how this global network of speculative finance, shell donations, and offshore money movement actually works. How it overlaps with the City of London, with Hong Kong, with the Cayman Islands. How what she calls here the gray or black economy operates completely above the reach of ordinary regulation. Remember the Brazilian philosopher Olavo de Carvalho would call them meta-capitalists. They were above the capitalist system. Their power and their wealth literally were hidden from the capitalist system that they claimed to be regulating. In other words, Trump did not put some outsider in charge of taking down Soros who would not have any clue on how to do it. He put the one man who used to be inside Soros's machine in charge of dismantling it. Somebody who already has the blueprints, somebody who can't be fooled by the same tricks Soros has used to dodge scrutiny for 50 years. That's not a sellout, that's strategy. It's not a sellout, that's strategy. And once again, when it comes to Trump, the conspiracy kooks have egg all over their faces. I don't know why anyone even listens to them anymore. Now, here's another piece of the puzzle. Just the News just published a report showing exactly how sophisticated this money laundering through charity scheme really is. I mean, this is a web that's going to take a long time to untangle. The Capital Research Center found that far left-leaning 501c3 charities, organizations whose donations are supposed to be tax deductible specifically because they stay out of partisan politics, have been acting as pass-through pipelines funneling cash to affiliated 501c4 organizations, which are allowed to engage in direct political and electoral activity at levels we never even imagined. Well, I guess we can imagine, but I mean, it's the pervasiveness of this is absolutely stunning. One group alone, the America Votes Education Fund, sounds so noble, does it not? Reported giving over $20.7 million in grants to its political affiliate while spending a grand total of $532 on office expenses and employing exactly 0 people. It's not a charity. According to this report, it's not a charity. It's a shell. In total, these groups spent $638 million during the 2024 election cycle registering voters. And according to the center's own analysis, they specifically targeted demographics statistically most likely to vote, ding, 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 Democrat, tracing all the way back to a scheme first outlined in leaked emails from Hillary Clinton's own campaign chairman, John Podesta, where a donors foundation literally laid out plans to use supposedly nonpartisan charities to reshape the electorate in the Democrats' favor. And Besson himself confirmed to Just the News that the Treasury Department is now actively reviewing exactly how the money moves back and forth between all of these paired charities and political arms. And they're now preparing to crack down on this and end this Democrat gravy train once and for all. But big picture, if we take some steps back here, there's something truly astonishing that's happening in all of this. What's really happening to Soros, as well as all these NGOs and nonprofits, is that their world, the very world that they built and that helped sustain them, that world, that liberal globalist world, is disappearing. It's collapsing. And astonishingly, even legacy media outlets are beginning to admit it. Some months back, the New York Times ran a piece admitting that the days of Soros and the World Economic Forum and Davos are really indeed coming to an end. And this is simply because the world that they built and that sustains them is itself coming to an end. That's the pattern you want to get. These globalist networks created a world, a global empire. That global empire is dying, and therefore these networks are comparably dying. Soros and his NGOs are slowly but surely dismantling. They're not getting stronger like, again, some of these conspiracy kooks will tell you. They don't know what time it is. They're still living in the 1990s, for heaven's sakes. Soros and his NGOs are slowly but surely dismantling precisely because they've lost influence. They've lost their power to direct and dictate political and economic life around the world. And that is largely because more and more populations are deliberately turning away from globalism and globalist structures and globalist institutions and are instead embracing nationalism and populism and traditionalism. And as the world becomes more and more civilizationalist, the globalist projects and purposes that Soros has pursued over the last several decades, not only do they run into brick walls, I mean, literal walls that frustrate his borderless open societies, but they run into increased government scrutiny. Now that the globalist governments that he helped impose on populations and that relied on to sustain him are increasingly disappearing. Think about it. There was a time Soros had free reign over El Salvador. Now, with Nayib Bukele, there was a time he had free reign over Argentina. Now, there's a time he had free reign over Colombia. Now, there's a time he had free reign over the United States. Now, there's a time he had free reign over Europe. Now, the rise of the AfD in Germany and Marine Le Pen, a national rally in France and Giorgia Meloni. And there was a time he had free reign, literally, over Yeltsin's Russia. Now, China. You see, that's the calculus. India, some of the most vicious things that have ever been said by George Soros come from their foreign minister. What is his name? Jay Shankar. Jay Shankar is a brilliant intellectual. Was part of the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, the Hindu nationalist party, ruling party there under the Prime Minister Narendra Modi government. And just some of the things he says about Soros are just so spot on, and they're so brutal. I mean, where's the what does it say in the Lord of the Rings? Our list of allies grows thin. He has nowhere. And that's the calculus. The more the liberal globalist world disappears, the more Soros's empire proportionally dissipates. The more the globalist world order disappears, the more Soros's empire proportionally dissipates. It's really that simple. The more the world moves away from Soros's vision of a globalist empire, the more the institutions perpetuating that vision begin to crack and eventually implode. There's just, not only is there no longer an audience for it, but now there's actual scrutiny, governmental political scrutiny over it. That's why this is just so much bigger than one billionaire. It's so much bigger than one foundation, so much bigger than just one tax audit. What we are watching in real time is the final dismantling of an entire post-war global order, an order where unaccountable, unelected billionaires and their tax-sheltered foundations could quietly reshape elections, topple governments, and manufacture grassroots movements from thousands of miles away, all while hiding behind the label of charity and getting subsidized by the very taxpayers whose governments they were working to undermine. That world, the world Soros built his empire inside of for 50 straight years, simply does not have a future anymore. Nations across the globe have already been slamming their doors on him one by one. India shut their doors on him. China, Russia, Turkey, the whole of the Middle East, Hungary, his own home country shut him out. And now the United States itself, the country whose own tax code quietly subsidized his global operation for decades, is closing that door for good. This is what genuine civilizational realignment looks like, gang. It's not just tariffs. It's not just border security. It's the systematic identification and removal of every single lever the old globalist order used to entrench itself, whether that's OPEC's grip on oil or Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz, or right here at home, George Soros' 50-year grip on America's own tax code. One by one, these levers are being found, and one by one, they are being pulled. Soros spent half a century building an empire that operated above governments, above borders, above accountability itself. And it's being unwound piece by piece by a Treasury Secretary who once worked inside that very same machine, armed with an executive order, an IRS tax force, and a $165 million bill with George Soros' name at the very top of it. This is not a minor tax story buried on page 12. This is the closing chapter of the Soros empire. An empire built on regime change, riots, impeachment schemes, and hundreds of millions of your own tax dollars. And it is finally coming to an end. His time is finished. Ours is just beginning. Over to you. Our super chats are still up. Fire away with any questions or comments you have. I'll be more than happy to answer them right here on this live stream. Also, let me ask you, if something happened tomorrow, all right, something serious, right? Like the power's out for weeks, or the water shuts off, or the shelves on your local supermarket are empty and they go bare. Would your family know what to do? Again, not would your family panic. Would your family know? You see, that's the difference our grandparents had. And it's the one thing truly worth passing down. Not more stuff, more skills. The kind that can't be taken away, that never run out of batteries, and can be handed to your kids and their kids. So that's why I absolutely love this brand new book. It's called The Ancestral Secrets. It's a book from Sierra Madre, and it compiles 100 of those practical skills taught step by step in these beautiful hardcover volume. And it's got these lovely illustrations inside here and photographs. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And you'll see it's secret number 72, secret number 45. All these kind of wonderful skills that you can do yourself, that you can show your grandkids, your kids. It's absolutely wonderful. It's beautifully bound. It's really meant to just last on your fireplace mantle for years and years and years. And it even includes a step-by-step video. This is very interesting. For every one of the skills beautifully detailed in its pages, skills that carried our ancestors through the Great Depression and even worse, right? So this isn't a book you read just once. It's a treasure trove of education that your family keeps for generations, that you talk about and the like. There's really never been a better time to get it, because there's really never been a time where we were frankly more disconnected from our ancestors' secrets. Their way of life without all the technology was a simpler, more resilient time. And there's also just never been a more, frankly, unstable time than now, where we're teetering on the precipice of complete destruction from a plethora of, previously, if you think about previously unimaginable events, geopolitical adversaries, AI, pandemics, EMPs, cyber attacks, list goes on and on. But the one your family turns to can be you. So just click on that link below. Join early as a VIP and reserve your first edition copy, signed by hand. Make it a Christmas early. Your family will love you for it. Click on that link below right now. It's an absolutely wonderful and beautiful book, Ancestral Secrets. Get it now. All right, guys, what do we got? Franz, good to hear from you, my friend. Dr. Steve, when this war that Carney has launched with the Dems backfire, will that clear the way for the 51st? I was thinking about that because Premier Smith of Alberta is really the only one that's making any sense here. Even Pierre Poilievre, I don't know. Pierre Poilievre just doesn't seem to be the man for the moment, in my opinion, at this point. He just doesn't. There was so much hope, and he's the head of the Conservative Party there, the Tories in Canada. But I have to say it's Danielle Smith. She's been brilliant. She's just, instead of taking on Trump, which is what Pierre Poilievre is doing, so he's just making himself Carney light. And that's how I think in the end he lost his election. One of the reasons why, there's a number of reasons. But instead, Danielle Smith is like, this is a total breakdown of the civilizational structure of North America. And Mark Carney does not understand the time we're living in right now. It's not a matter of, is Trump right or wrong? It's a matter of trying to understand the time we're living in. We need to live in a civilizational harmony together in the Western Hemisphere. And Carney he still thinks it's 1998. He still thinks, the WEF is running the world, and he's destroying Canada in the process. So I think she's brilliant. Well, she's going to hold the referendum in October. Is it enough to pass? It doesn't look like it so far. It'll be very interesting to see. So I'm interpreting, Franz, your question in terms of Alberta and the referendum for secession. If we start to see dramatic numbers shifting in that direction, then it is very clear that Carney completely misread even his own country in this process in terms of sentiment of his own country. Because there's a lot of Canadians rooting for Trump. They're just sick and tired of this regime they're having to live under. If the needle just doesn't move, well, then it just seems most Canadians have doubled down on sort of the resentment towards the United States. And I've met some. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making this up. I've met some that refuse to vacation in the United States as long as Trump is president. It's just a way of sticking it to Trump because he's so insulting towards Canadians. He's not. He's insulting to your regime. Your regime sucks. Your government sucks. So we'll see. We'll have to see. But I mean, it's an impossible task for Mark Carney to win. Their exports to the United States, which make up about 75% of their total exports, that makes up 20% of their total GDP. So Americans buying Canadian stuff makes up 20% of their GDP. Canadians buying American stuff makes up 1% of our GDP. Who's going to win this stare down? Who's going to win this game of chicken? Who would you put your money on? Would you put US dollars or Canadian dollars on it, right? So there's no way he's going to win. So I'm with you. This could backfire big time in terms of Alberta separatism. William O'Toole, predict just for fun. What do you think the number of states will be by 2050? Oh my, 50, 55, 60. Oh, there you go, with East Washington, right? Or East Oregon, or a greater Idaho, right? Or California, Puerto Rico, Greenland, Alberta, to name a few possibilities. Thank you. I didn't even think about that. By 2050. Well, so, I mean, one way of thinking about that is where's all the political power going to be by 2050? It's going to be clearly in red states, right? We'll see that by 2032 with the 2030 census. So red states are picking up 14 electoral votes. Blue states are losing them. That will most likely lock the Democrats out and particularly with all the redistricting. That's going to lock the Democrats out of power for the foreseeable future, starting around for the midterm in 2032. Is that no? That's a presidential election in 2032. I think JD's is a lock thus far in 2028. We tend to vote for the same president twice, sometimes 3 times, and I don't think he'll have a problem in 2032, provided he gets 2028. So I think the country will have completely realigned, and when all said and done, then it's going to be, if there are any added states, it's going to be on the terms of red state America. So yeah, if we want to carve out another state with Eastern Oregon or Eastern Washington, as you're mentioning, sure, why not? Or Western Maryland, I could see that. They want to kind of hook up with West Virginia, since Garrett County and those areas out there are going to be inordinately Republican, as opposed to the insanity in Baltimore. So it'll be whatever it is. It's going to be red state. I doubt Puerto Rico. I don't even think Puerto Ricans in general want to be a state. I don't see Greenland necessarily becoming a state per se, but it could, it'd be a U.S. territory for sure. Optimus Rock Dog Prime, Dr. Steve. The Democrat plantation hasn't put their best up since JFK. It's a good point. I mean, without USAID, Soros, and stealing from the taxpayers, are they even a viable party come 2030? I'm Optimus Rock Dog. I send this message so we live on. I love it. No, that's what I mean. I don't think so. I don't. I mean, they live, breathe, and have their being on funding, but their funding isn't the same as Republican funding. So Republican funding is it tends to be genuine funding. It's not USAID, taxpayer funded, and the like. We certainly have been behind the ball in creating these NGOs and the Center for Democratic Education, all these fronts, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm just making up a title there. Don't yell at me. Oh no, we're a good organization. I'm sure you are if you're out there, but we're just behind the 8 ball. We rely on private donors like Elon, and it was for a long while. It was the Koch brothers, and who went fully anti-Trump. So in the end, we're behind the 8 ball of this. These NGOs, these nonprofits, the USAID networks, that was all left wing, and it's all gone. And they're going to have to make up that money. And the more private donors come in, the more they know they're going to be scrutinized by a Trump Treasury Department and IRS. And they don't want to do that either. So I think this is very, very important to cutting off the gravy train from them. And I think, ironically, it's our strength that we stayed out of that network, that web of funding because the Republicans have had to rely on just really good ideas and to at least give lip service to their rank and file grassroots. But then with the more Trumpian Republican Party, the more populist nationalist party, then you're going to see more and more of an alignment between rank and file sentiments and the people we put in office. So I think it's great. Lennox, it seems that Western media and other Western pillars are under an organized influence. How much negative influence the Soros organization really had on Western civilization and why? It's had a lot. It has. So big picture, Soros's claim to sort of geopolitical fame, as if I recall, goes back to a paper he published. So basically, he made his billions, shorting the British pound, and then started to devote his life to academics and to do. He's written a lot of books, but it kind of goes back to an article he wrote. Oh gosh, was it 89, 90? I think it was. I'm trying to remember. Called The New World Order. I think it's called NATO and the New World Order. And he had a basic theory for how let me back up. And what it revealed was he was clearly a believer in what's called progressive realism, which is more or less founded by Francis Fukuyama, who made the argument that a meta-historical argument that the world's economies and governments were inevitably coming to an almost Marxist-like, communist-like synthesis, a consensus. That's what Marx believed. Marx believed that history was working, called it dialectical materialism, that all of history was ultimately going to one ultimate form of government, and that's communism. What Francis Fukuyama did is he flipped that on its head and said, no, it's actually all going to liberal democracy. Marx was right. It is all the world's economies and politics and even cultures are indeed all consolidating, but it's not communism. It's liberal democracy. And Soros bought that. Soros believed that. So what Soros did is he came up with a concept of world order, where Western wealthy countries could use their money to, in effect, fund Eastern European armies to force Russia into compliance, because he saw Russia as the biggest obstacle to this world order. He thought back in the day, China was 100% with us after détente, in the 70s. And he with Kissinger and decoupling from Russia, he thought, they were going to be liberal globalists right along with us. This is before the rise of the BJP and the coming to power and the RSS and all that in India. And so they were liberal secular democracy. So you just saw the world was just going liberal secular. And so he believed if you put the money and networks in place, you can allow, I kid you not, this is his argument. You can read it yourself. It's online, called NATO and the New World Order. You could allow Eastern European armies like Ukraine to basically bully and take over Russia militarily because they can handle casualties. This is Soros. Right? They can handle a lot of casualties. Their populations they can stomach this stuff just because of their history. And so he has deliberately, over the last 30, 40 years, used his NGOs to refashion as much of the world's, particularly the obstacles to this vision of the world as possible. And he's had no problem sacrificing Ukrainian troops in the process. I mean, this is what This is his empire. And so that was in the 1990s. But then in the 2000s, since he didn't have the enemy of communism anymore, the new enemy became environmental apocalypticism. So he needed a global enemy. And the global enemy was at first communism, which he survived in Hungary and all that sort of stuff. And then now it was an enemy we were all facing, regardless of what side of the aisle you were on. So that's why back then the environmentalist movement, they thought was going to be their key to power. But when all said and done, Soros really was a progressive realist, or is a progressive realist, and he honestly believed that the world was moving inevitably, historically, in a liberal globalist direction. And now, of course, his entire world's collapsed because pretty much all the liberal institutions that he depended on are more or less obsolete. Brian, my good friend, I saw yesterday that several blue states are now suing the Trump administration over the USPS ballot rules. What's your expectation of how it will go? Can they run interference for long enough that the rules will not be enforceable for the midterms? Okay, so that's what I'm nervous with. So when I'm looking at, I'm not even so much looking at the merits, because I thought the Supreme Court more or less telegraphed. Maybe not, because maybe they're just so procedurally sensitive. But the Obama-appointed judge, who, by the way, just put another injunction on it, temporary restraining order on it, 2 days after the Supreme Court's decision to lift this judge's previous temporary restraining order. The Supreme Court basically, they said this judge has, literally no jurisdiction to do it, but it was based on an argument. The argument was that when this order goes into force, it's going to, it's going to damage inordinately voting rights for these groups of people. And the Supreme Court said that's a hypothetical. It hasn't happened. If they could prove it has happened, fine, but you can't issue an injunction based on a hypothetical, on a subjunctive, as a possibility. So the judge then turned around and said, all right, well, I'll find another reason to block it. And so we're back to square one again. And plus, of course, because the USPS did announce, once the Supreme Court had made its decision, that you can't, this judge had no grounds for her ruling. They said the rules are in place, and so you have all the blue states suing. So I think this is the concern I have. So I believe it's September 3rd is when the day comes in the court with this Obama-appointed judge, where she will decide whether or not to lift the TRO or to impose a permanent injunction as the executive order is considered unconstitutional. Again, why a local judge gets to do this, I thought the Supreme Court nipped this in the bud. They're not allowed to do these unilateral decisions, but alas, here we are. And for me, just, we'll decide on September 3rd. It's just constantly kicking the can to the point of, but now we have to start delivering mail-in ballots. It's August 1st, time to do it. And before we know it, we've missed the deadline, as it were. So that's my concern. I think it's not enforceable for the midterms because they're just trying to run interference in the process. That's my concern. So I'm hoping the Supreme Court's going to step in. I do think they sort of telegraphed that they would see that Trump is perfectly within his rights to tell the United States Postal Service that there are standards for the. Remember, it's really interesting. The state legislatures can say, "Hey, we're the ones who decide how we do our elections," but it's the U.S. Postal Service that has to operate by a chain of custody protocol that is trans-state. So the chain of custody protocol is not determined by states. It's determined by the federal government, the U.S. Postal Service. So as part of that, Trump has come in and said that you have to abide by this new chain of custody, which is you have to provide a list of your voters, and then we're going to cross-reference it with our, citizen registry. And if there's any that are not on there, then they're not getting a ballot. Again, it's very interesting. There is a default to this here where they wanted to use that to force the states, that cross-checking process, to force states to clear out their illegals and they're dead and people have moved out, people who probably don't even exist, clear them all out of their voting rolls before anything gets sent. At the very least, now what the USPS can do is they can send out ballots only to those who are on the federal list. So they don't even have to depend on the states at all. So again, to me, in the end, they're just, the blue states are just demonstrating how desperate they are in all of this, as you well know. Democrats are in power. I know our colleagues like to think Democrats are in power because they care for the poor and for the vulnerable. Democrats are in power because they're corrupt, because they're crooks. This is what the modern political left has always been. It's a business model that enriches the powerful at the expense of the people they claim to help. That was USAID in a nutshell. And I just think in the end, they know that if the USPS is now able to enforce Trump's EO, it's over. If they have to clean up their vote, not only if they have to clean up their voter rolls, but if they have to reveal them to the federal government, and then the federal government publishes all the illegals and all of the illegitimate voters and non-citizens and the like on there, they know they're shot. They know they've just proven Trump's point. So, but I'm with you, Brian. It's that latter point. I think they're just trying to run interference long enough to run out the clock at this point. And we'll see if they can do it. Vaughn, Dr. Steve, I have heard recently that there should be a moratorium of some kind on political polls because they're so out of whack. For instance, I'm very confident, as you are, that Tallarico has no chance in Texas, yet he's polling ahead of Paxton, as they always do. I mean, Beto was polling way past Cruz and ended up losing by 2. I mean, all these polls, you just know by now these polls will be off by 4, 5, or 6. They already have been with the primaries. My heavens, and some of these Democrat primaries, like the one in Wisconsin, they were off by over 20. We were seeing they were off by 10 to 15 in Michigan. They're always off in Maine with Susan Collins. If you just look at the last time in 2020, a year when Democrats supposedly won the White House and all that. She won by 6 points, but her opponent was supposed to win by 8, and you just look at the RCP average. And that's what you saw. So they were off by nearly, I think, 10 points or so, something like that on average. So, no, I mean, Europe does that. There's a number of European countries that don't let you poll a few weeks before the election, so as not to influence. But most people, I don't know how influenced people are with polls anymore. We're kind of a post-emotional society. We don't get swayed very much with that. And again, I mean, they were doing this with Trump. We were told Kamala was supposed to win in a landslide. We're told Hillary was supposed to win in a landslide. We're told Biden was supposed to win. I mean, my heavens, what was it? One poll had Biden winning by 15 points, 16 points, just a couple of weeks before the election. They were only off by. So, yeah, I wouldn't pay much attention to it. No, Paxton's got this. There's no way Texas is going with Tallarico. Texas. So now we apparently have Lake America. Would you ever do an analysis on Trump's trolling? How much is strategic and how much is just poking fun? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the trolling there is a, what do we want to call it? what's the term? Not so much mocking. Oh, there's a term for it. My brain is going blank here. I'll be thinking about it when I'm not thinking about it. But it is a kind of mocking. It is a kind of self-confident. Why am I forgetting the term? Anyway, I've read there was actually a study on the biblical foundations of it. And it's a sign of self-confidence. Just think of the way David mocks and scoffs at Goliath, for example. It's a sign of self-confidence. It's a sign that you're going to lose and we're going to win, and it's part of the momentum of that victory. So I think Trump, I think it's both. I don't think it's an either or. I think he honestly believes that mocking and scoffing at and ridiculing your opponent is part of the strategy of defeating them. That's what he's doing with Carney. I have a theory, more or less that's why he did not want Pierre Poilievre to win in their last national election, because he knew he was going to have to smack the hell out of Canada with all of their rude, corrupt, taking advantage of American consumers. You remember, Canada, 75% of Canada's buyers, export buyers, are Americans. 75%. But then they turn around, and that was generally across the board free market. We didn't tariff before Trump. We didn't tariff their products. But then we have I think it's about 14% of our products are bought by Canadians, and they tariff the hell out of them in order to protect their consumers. Now, they have every right to do that, but then we're going to tariff the hell out of there. And then the moment we do, they say, well, then we're going to reciprocate. We're going to fight back. What do you mean? You're the ones who drew the first blood, as it were. You threw the first punch. You rely on our military, you pay nothing on military, and then you lecture us on how our welfare, we don't provide health care for our citizens. F you. So I think Trump knew he was going to have to smack Ottawa around a lot. And I don't think he wanted necessarily a conservative government in there to smack around. That's just a theory. I don't know that. But I think the trolling is part and parcel of Trump's strategy, to get in their heads. It's not just the psychology of the opponents, it's also the psychology of his side. He wants this side high-fiving and pumping their fists, and USA is a way of just kind of taking out the opponent. I've read some, just the typical doomers online. Oh, this is such a stupid idea, dude. It's called civilizationalism. Civilizations name things. Adam names the animals. You exercise dominion over something by naming it. And so Trump renaming the Gulf of America wasn't just a cute idea. It was designating that body of water now as a sovereign American energy point, an energy point on the planet. That belongs to us now that we know that half of Venezuelan oil is being sold through American oil and gas brokers. So, I mean, to me, it's just all part of the civilizationalism of, we call this Lake Ontario. Why? Half of it's in the United States. Well, I'm going to call it Lake America. And guess what? I can do it. I can, with a stroke of a pen, I can do it. And I can force all federal maps and documents and so forth to reflect that now. So I think it's all the same thing. It's strategic. There is strategy to poking fun. Ville's Mamdani family scooping up New York City vacant properties. Oh, are they? Are they? Yeah. Well, they have. I mean, they have. And Mamdani himself owns a vacant property. I believe 2 slices of property in Uganda that are vacant. So he'd be subject to his own pied-à-terre tax as well. But of course he isn't. So yeah, they're meta-capitalists. They're meta-capitalists. So a meta-capitalist is one who accumulates the power and wealth, and for these idiot socialists generally, they're the ones who have to accumulate the power. They're not smart enough to accumulate the wealth by themselves. They have to get it from you, but they accumulate enough power and wealth to stand above the so-called evil capitalist system that they regulate. So when the communists of old, the Marxists of old, like denounced capitalism even for themselves, they were still corrupt and they were still living high on the hog on everyone. But at least they weren't living in palaces per se. I mean, outside of Ceausescu or something like that. These guys are living in palaces. They are living as the ultimate capitalists, but they see themselves as above the capitalist system that they claim to regulate. So no, he's an idiot. Franz, Dr. C, could you please explain to the trolls what the difference is with an EO and a national emergency? What happens to the non-compliant? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I don't know about what happens to whatever the national emergency declares it to be. So as I understand it, this is from 1983. There was a decision from the Supreme Court that argued that national emergencies are qualitatively distinct from an EO. An EO, an executive order, is subject to judicial scrutiny. They are justiciable, as we say. They can be struck down by a judge. But a declaration of war, a declaration of emergency, right? A declaration of military action, that's non-judiciable. That is for the president to decide whether we should, not a judge. Judge doesn't decide that. Now, if the people say, wow, the president's gone nuts, we need to stop this emergency action, that's where Article 1 comes in. Congress, 2/3 vote in Congress, both chambers, can stop it. It can override it, and then the president must rescind that national order. But no judge can get in the president's way of a national emergency order. So that's the difference fundamentally. And Trump has done this before. He got funding for his wall by diverting some military funding back in, I think he did in 2019, after the Democrats got to power and blocked all funding for the building of his wall. So he declared a national emergency at the border. He has already done that as well this time around. And it's part of the same thing. It's like, when he declares an organization a terrorist organization, the judge can't say, well, no, you can't do that, because the judge isn't in the position of competence. It's not a judicial lane to determine whether a group is terrorist. It's their judicial lane is to determine whether something is constitutional, not whether a emergency declaration is valid in terms of who it's launched against. So that's the difference fundamentally. Kevin, good to hear from you, my friend. Will we see Soros arrested? Seizure of all assets, and the same for all of his associates. Ooh, Alex as well, right? Allies and followers. Who else will go down in this action? I don't know if we're going to see all that. I do not know. I can't go that far. I don't know. What we've got so far, it seems to me, is a concerted effort to completely defund and dismantle the Soros empire. So they defunded it via, first and foremost, by cutting off the spigot, as it were, cutting off USAID. And now the dismantling would be taking whatever funds they have left and removing tax-exempt status from those funds. And so you're in effect turning it into a 501c4, which is a political organization, which is not tax-exempt. 501c3s are supposed to be charitable organizations. Those are tax-exempt, right? Like a church. And so he runs 501c3s that are just more or less pass-throughs into 501c4s. So they'll be treated as 501c4s, and yeah, they'll probably still have some checks written to them, but not very much after that, because people are writing checks to 501, especially the size of the checks, to 501c3 so that they can enjoy reciprocal tax write-off with their own taxes. So that's all they're trying to do right now, as I could see it. But that's enough. That's all you need to do, because if you don't have money, you're shot. Again, keep in mind that was Soros's frame. It's going to be Western money combined with Western money combined with Eastern European might. And that was going to somehow take over the world. It was the immediate enemy was the fledgling Soviet Union and then the non-compliant Russia. But he is the money guy. He is the one who sets up this entire globalist network and then just funds it with millions and millions of dollars. And we have, like here in the United States, we have stats that show that the say House of Representative candidate who wins their race, Democrat or Republican, 90% of the time it's the one who's the most funded. This does not count for presidential campaigns, but for congressional campaigns, it does. Those who are best funded tend to win. So right now I'm in the Delaware Valley area, and this is a very, very Democrat area. All the commercials I'm seeing are Democrat commercials because there's no Republicans running any commercials because they know they can't win. So they're not bothering. So if you're in an area where you're starting to see commercial after commercial after commercial of like a Republican candidate, that means, that's where the money is going, because 90% of the time they're the ones who are going to win, the ones who are most funded, well-funded. Soros knows that. So he knows that you just got to set up all the tentacles and then just pour the money in it. And so what we're doing is we're getting rid of the money. We're drying up the money. And then the tentacles, we think, will be brittle enough to break apart after that. And then there's you've got Karen that's going down with him. You got SPLC that's going down with him. There's I think they're looking at all the who's the billionaire that's living in Beijing right now. Why am I forgetting his name? But I think they're going to be keeping an eye. I don't know if they can get him, but I think they could possibly freeze assets and the like. Robo Guy with the Lindsay Clancy stuff being demonic, especially with her supporters. I'm seeing people say we should repeal the 19th Amendment. So don't get me into that now. I ain't going there, dude. I go there. No, I have no thoughts. Again, I'm a descriptive guy, not a prescriptive guy. You come to my channel to get analysis of what's happening, not analysis of what ought to happen. I just keep my analysis very so I have no opinions on that. If there were a mass movement to get rid of the 19th Amendment, I would be covering it. But right now it's a completely fringe movement. I'm not saying I'm descriptive. I'm not saying one way or the other. I mean, when all is said and done, even if you got rid of 19th Amendment, women would still vote. But generally speaking, they would be heads of households. So prior to the 19th Amendment, we tended to be very covenantal in our understanding. So I could help you or talk about it historically. We tend to be very covenantal in our understanding of human society. And so, when it came down to voting for things, whether at church or in the board or in government, usually there was a representative, a federal head for the family unit, and that federal head, classically speaking, is the man. Now, in a family where there's no man, if the father is absent or has passed away or what have you, then the mother would vote. The woman would vote on behalf of the family. So it's not that women didn't vote prior to the 19th Amendment. It's that in a federalized conception of human society, the family was considered the basic unit, not necessarily the individual. And so there was a designated person to vote on behalf of the family, and it was universally recognized at the time as the man, the atom, the representative atom for the family. So even if we got rid of 19th Amendment, women would still be voting. And especially with all the single women out there, they would technically, as I understand it, be voting. It would just be probably cut in half or what have you. I don't know. I don't know how it would flesh out. But it's just pure hyperbole or pure speculation, hypothetical. So August 10th. A federal judge in Boston has blocked the USPS. Yeah, same one. It's the same one. Yeah, who did the original one. Then the Supreme Court already said that President Trump could go through with it. It's frustrating. It is. It is. Yeah, it's the same one too. So technically, all right. So this is how law works, and this is just. I mean, again, this is why this is why I limit my legal coverage, because it drives me crazy as well. As I understand it. It was a hypothetical that was put forward to this judge, Obama-appointed judge, that if the USPS standards go through, these voting demographics, and they're always left-wing Democrats, are going to be inordinately harmed and disenfranchised. She said, "You're right," and she issued an injunction. Supreme Court came in and said, You have no authority, you have no jurisdiction to institute an injunction based on a hypothetical. If this goes into effect, then you don't know that. There's no, so they struck it down. So new plaintiffs came in. They argued it differently, and I forget their argument. It obviously doesn't matter. I tend to look at the arguments after the Supreme Court decides on them. New plaintiffs come in, same thing. They judge shop, find Biden or Obama appointee. They make a different argument. She goes, "You're right," and she slaps on another injunction. So you're right. It's kind of like whack-a-mole, and that's what I think is making us very frustrated. I would love for the Supreme Court just to come in and knock this down one way or the other, and that's what I'm hoping they'll do. We thought they did. We certainly thought they did. But the Democrats are desperate here. This is existential. If USPS, if these measures go into effect, they're shot. And that's why in the end, I just think Trump needs to give them all a middle finger and declare a national emergency, and then dare Congress to, and then I'm sure you'll get some activist judge saying you can't do that. Yeah, it's non-judiciable. Go back to 1983 Supreme Court ruling. And dare Congress to overturn them with a 2/3 vote, which of course they can't. Kevin, do you agree that communist China with Xi Jinping is undergoing a catastrophic, unrecoverable demographic, fiscal, and economic collapse? So we need to end reliance on it before it implodes on itself. Good question. I don't think that's what Trump is doing. I think I actually think he's concerned about China. He's very concerned about the future of China. In terms of their accumulation of power. So the demographic thesis on China certainly has merit. They are losing a lot of power. And it's almost stunning because they're so big. When we say they're 1.4 billion, that 0.4 is bigger than the total population of the United States. China is massive. India is even bigger. I think, aren't they at 1.5 now? But it's a massive country. So a governor over a province oversees a population the size of the United States or the size of Brazil or something. They're just huge. So the population implosion in real numbers is gigantic. We're talking, like 50 million in a matter of 20 years, whatever. I forget whatever stats. And then you have people like Peter Zion who believes actually their population could be cut in half in the very near future. I forgot what his projection is, 10, 20 years or so. And that they simply they won't have the economic output. It would be a devastating. If they went from like 1.4 to 700 million, that's just a different country. It'd be like Black Plague coming in and wiping out half the population. I don't know if those numbers are going to bear out. Number one, those are the most extreme. Number two, they're not the only country losing population in the region. Japan is losing it even around the same level, if not faster. South Korea is losing it even faster. Singapore is losing it even faster. So they're not outliers. That's the problem here. They're not out. Same with the West for that matter, particularly Europe. They're not outliers. It's a global South, like in sub-Saharan Africa. That are having kids 3, 4, 5 per woman. They're the one, and parts of Southeast Asia as well, rural areas are having lots of kids. The 1040 window is where having a lot of children. Middle East, not all. Jordan's going through and obviously Iran and Syria are all going through a population decline. But Pakistan, they're growing by leaps and bounds. So all of that's to say that I don't think the effects of the demographic decline are going to be as catastrophic simply because they're not alone. Other nations, particularly surrounding them in that Sino sphere, are declining relatively at comparable rates, and their economies are going to be comparably affected. And just in the world of AI and robotics, you're not going to need people the way you need it before. There's no way around that. We're already seeing that with autonomous cars. You're just not going to need people the way you need them. So the world's changing in a way that might be able to absorb and accommodate population decline. Having said that, I just think President Trump is concerned that China, he is, and I think this is right, he is assuming the worst case scenario for China in terms of them accumulating power and maintaining their power. And he's trying to box them out in the process. Then if they demographically implode, all the better. We get 2 for 1 as a way of thinking about it, and that we've decoupled our dependence upon them and got other countries to decouple their dependence upon them in the process. So, great question, Kevin. Franz, does sovereignty and amnesty have compatibility? I'd have to think about that one. I mean, in terms of my prima facie, no. Prima facie, it seems to me that they're two opposite. They're two opposite dynamics, But I guess you could say if the people want to give amnesty, was like when Reagan in '86 granted amnesty, was that an act of a sovereign nation? Yeah, in one sense, but not in a globalist context where you have people like Soros looking for borderless countries. So I guess so. I mean, it seems to me it's the macro context in the end. So if the macro context is that the powers that be, the elites, the ones that conspire, right, against sovereign nations, if they're the ones who are doing everything they can to try to erase borders, then whether you know it or not, even if it's popular, granting amnesty is destroying your sovereignty. But if we are in a nationalist, populist, civilizationalist world, as we are now, where borders are being enforced like never before, and then a nation decides it wants to grant amnesty, I see that as perfectly within their sovereign right. And it's consistent within a world where borders are mutually reinforced. The only way we know our borders can be enforced is if Canada and Mexico are enforcing their borders, right? So there you go. In human condition, and thank you for the gift. Thank you all for your gifts. Very, very appreciated. My only fear of MAGA is that it might get so comfortable they can no longer envision its own defeat. We must remain vigilant and never underestimate commies and the people who vote for them. Absolutely. Presumptuousness is the root of your fall, and I think that's what happened to liberals in many respects. They honestly believed they had built an undefeatable system, and that's why I think they're going berserk right now. That's partly what's behind TDS. So you just cannot believe he's actually doing it. He's ripping apart that which was supposed to be unassailable. So you're absolutely right. We can never, ever be presumptuous, and we can never be complacent. No, you're absolutely right. And that's, and I tend to always, if I give some good news in the midterms and so forth, I tend to always say, okay, gang, look, we still have a far way to go. It's not here yet, and anything can change. I want to do that. I want to give those little the flashes of of action, the need to take action. I don't want compliance by any stretch of the imagination. No question on that. And so you're absolutely right. And the way to do that, when all is said and done, is self-reflection. How it's like spiritual disciplines, focusing on, before you point the finger at someone else, you have to point the finger at yourself. Where am I spiritually weak? What sins am I wrestling with? If I'm honest with myself, that kind of self-evaluation, I think, is very good for a nation, for a movement. All right, where are we weak? Where do we risk getting hit, and hit hard, by an enemy that is hell-bent on destroying us? That's what third worldism fundamentally is about. The idea that the West is the ultimate evil upon the earth. We are Mordor, and they see themselves as Aragorn, and they're going to take us down. And of course, what are they going to do? They're setting up their own Mordor. That's the irony. So, Texas on the shock. On the podcast, Panikins, do you think their influence is rising or falling? I keep having ones that are black-pilled, peddling or trying to oust JD showing up on my feed. Yeah, unfortunately, those are going to be the pro-Israel crowd. So this is I'm just calling them as I see them here. If you're talking about what JD is having a really hard time, that tends to be the pro-Israel crowd. The pro-Israel crowd, the Israel First crowd, as they're often called, I just think they're their own worst enemy, to be honest with you. Because wherever they find a home, or seemingly find a home politically, they very quickly make themselves unwelcome. They wear out the welcome very, very quickly. So after February 28th, the pro-Israel crowd rushed to MAGA 100%. They were 1,000% behind MAGA, because Trump was doing the brave thing. He was finally taking on Iran, and he's going to see it all the way through. And, Ben Shapiro was calling, Trump the most brave man this is the most amazing political move I've ever seen, blah, blah, whatever it is, right? The accolades come. And then Trump says, okay, we're done. And what does that crowd turn around and do? Okay, we're done. No, we've got a ceasefire. We're good. We're going to get the flow of oil moving, and we're going to bring the pain at the pump down. We're going to bring the prices of the pump down. Relieve the pain at the pump. What do they do? But you didn't do what we wanted you to do. You didn't say what you said you were going to do. And all of a sudden you realize, dudes, are you with us? Do you understand how this game is played? Okay. We're a team. And the captain just said, we're done. Okay. He's got his reasons. And we're going to defend him. And we're going to point the fingers at the other side and make sure they never come to power. No. They act like, oh, no. I'm above politics now. And I can criticize best. So this side hates JD. They see JD as more or less best friends with Tucker, or, whatever. And they just see him as very anti-Israel. For right or for wrong, I actually don't know where it comes from. Maybe because they see him as a Catholic integralist, and they see Catholic integralists as inherently anti. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from, but shut them off. I mean, they're just pushing propaganda. That's all they're doing. It's just pure propaganda. Does it have a lot of influence? No. Outside of their circles? No, none at all. Although the polls showed JD would crush anybody in a Republican primary, including Marco. No, and then if Trump gives him the nod, he wins. It's just literally that simple. They have no power beyond that. Whatever little influence, but they have no power beyond just the cheering that they can give your side for the little time they will do it. But their loyalties are not with MAGA. No more than a libertarian's loyalties are with MAGA. Dave Smith was the first to leave the MAGA train. He was all MAGA. Trump gets in, and Trump opens. No, that you don't say that. I'm out. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Massey and MTG. Their loyalties are not with MAGA. They're not MAGA at all, despite all their lip service. So no, I don't see their influence rising at all. They're the podcastistan. I think they're virtualists, and as virtualists, they are mired in virtual reality. They are not mired in empirical reality. I saw one of them the other day saying there's obviously 100 million illegal migrants in the United States right now. I mean, that was on the X post. 100 million migrants in the United States right now. Where are they getting that number? Where are they getting that number? I've seen numbers as high as 30 million. I've seen that, possibly. What we're finding actually is we're getting some stats that show actually the number's probably more around 12 to 15. With Trump already, I'm getting numbers now of already getting rid of at least 3, possibly as many as 4.5 million. It's tough when you're dealing with accurate numbers here. But one of the ways you can do it is you can actually find a very accurate number of how many illegal aliens are in a particular state and then extrapolate from that based on models of states, other states, proportionately how many would be in those states. And so many of these models are around 15 million. But again, there's models, there's study and so forth. These conspiracy podcasts, these panicking podcasters just pulling numbers out of their butts at this point. It's sad, and it's virtualism. They're just living in virtual reality, and empirical reality has nothing to do with their analysis. So at this point, it just seems to be, it's just this kind of weird sort of, almost sort of like a WWE entertainment industry. Although I like WWE, I prefer WWE, but it's its own surreal virtualist reality that has literally nothing to do with empirical reality. The problem, though, is, and so their one goal is to suck you in. That's it. Because once you're in, then they have their own plausibility structures placed into it. Since it's virtual reality, right? Candace Owens, I think, would be a perfect example of this. So since it's virtual reality, since everything is virtual, then the plausibility structures for what is truth ends up becoming comparably virtual. It's all virtual. And so it's you're just kind of sucked into this quasi-Gnostic digital pseudo reality that takes its place of real reality. And thank God, I think the vast majority of MAGA is in real reality right now. All the polls seem to show it. Voter registration trends show it. The amount of money they're raising shows it. So I wouldn't worry about it. Richard Dr. Steve, a conservative podcaster, predicts a Republican bloodbath in the midterms. Your thought? I mean, again, what's your data? I just have to look at what your data is. There are some pollsters who are seeing certainly danger for the Republican Party, but they tend to be outliers. The vast majority of the polling right now shows that in terms of the generic ballot, Democrats and Republicans are relatively close. Democrats look like, I think on the Real Clear Politics average, they have about a 5 or 6 point lead. That's not enough. That's not going to do it. In other words, the electorate will be 5 or 6% more Democrat than Republican. It's not going to do it. That'll be about a 7 point swing from 2024. It's pretty significant, but that's typical for a midterm. But in an era of redistricting where seats have been redrawn to now represent disproportionate partisan makeup, it's increasingly hard to see a true, toss-up seat. Most seats are within districts that were, say, in this case, Trump +7, +8, Trump +9. Okay, so it swings 7. Okay, but you're in a Trump +8 district. You lose. It's not going to happen. So, you know, you have 7% more Democrat. Yeah, but it was a Trump +8. All right, well, you're shot. And, oh, yeah, that Trump +3 district, they inordinately come out and they vote. So it may be Republican +2 there, but the +7 average around the country doesn't affect this particular district. So again, I'd have to see the data they're drawing from, because Cook Political Report, Crystal Ball, Inside Election, they're seeing right now only about 20 or so toss-up seats. And I'm sorry, that's not a bloodbath. Even if Democrats won, and they didn't win all toss-up seats in 2018, the last time they won 40 seats. So even if they won all toss-up seats, 20 seats, that's not a bloodbath. It's just not. They're done. They end with 229 seats to the Republicans, whatever it is, 207 or whatever. That's not a bloodbath. The ceilings are very low for both parties right now. So maybe in bloodbath, they're looking at the Senate and they're like, oh man, I mean, Democrats are just going to steamroll them in the Senate. Yeah, but it's summer. Polling bias always works in favor of Democrats. And some of them are just polling idiocy. I mean, with Tallarico beating Paxton, who's won 3 statewide elections before by double-digit margins as Attorney General, beating him by 4 points and so forth. Yeah, those are probably a good 10 points off, easily. Ramaswamy losing to his Democrat opponent as a governor in Ohio. That's like Trump +13 or +14. No, not going to happen. Not even in a +7 Democrat. That's just not going to happen. Electorate. So I'd have to look at the data, and I've heard the arguments that the Republicans are going to get wiped out, but I just don't. What are you relying on? Generally, they're relying on polling. You don't want to rely on polling. You can use polling, but you don't want to rely on it because it's so off. It's so bad. Polling has demonstrably gotten really bad this year. So you don't go there. So then what do you have? Well, you have voter registration trends. Democrats are getting crushed in those. Okay. Well, you got fundraising trends. Democrats again are getting crushed in all that. You got issues. Democrats are getting crushed. They're always on the 20% side of 80-20 issues. Yeah. Affordability. Well, yeah, affordability is a really big thing in Manhattan. Yeah. Is it that big of a thing in Mississippi? I don't know. We'll have to see, but I'm just not seeing it in the data. Deborah, the midterms depend on turnout. What message should GOP candidates focus on to get out low turnout voters, especially Christians? Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Deborah. I don't think it's a message. I think it's a machine. You have to have a turnout machine. So this is where Cliff Bologna will have as a guest here on the show in the next week, and he'll give you the strategy of how they're trying to get out the vote, particularly in Pennsylvania. No, you have to go to them. You have to go to them, and you have to basically provide the mechanism for them to both fill out a ballot and send it in. Most will not go. They'll order a ballot, and you can, as I understand it, you can get the ballot ordered for them, and then filled out and sent in. So it's a door knocking initiative. Door knocking is not trying to convince somebody to vote for somebody. Door knocking is going to low to no prop Republican voters and getting them to vote, and getting them to vote early, because the voters that vote on Election Day, they're coming out no matter what. So you got that. And we tend to dominate Election Day. Republicans always have. It's the early voters that we need to work on, and that requires what we call a get out the vote campaign. Joan, how can a district judge defy SCOTUS? All right, so I know, Joan. It's so frustrating. She didn't. It's a different case. It's a different case. It's a different plaintiff, and it's a different argument. Bottom line. So that's what the Democrats do. The Democrats just whack-a-mole it. They don't send up one complaint, and they send up a dozen, so that if the Supreme Court strikes down a ruling by this judge with one complainant, one plaintiff, they'll just put in another plaintiff, and that same activist judge can continue to fulfill her job description. She was appointed in order to ensure left-wing power remains in place. That's her job. Her job isn't to interpret the law. Her job's to, and this is why I despise about the fact that the Supreme Court plays along with this BS. Just censor our. You're going to have to hold this judge into contempt. Why are all these cases going through her courtroom? Brian, follow up. The judge lifted her. I know. She lifted her temporary restraining order yesterday. That was the original one. As I understand it, though, it's a new one today. That's the whack-a-mole insanity. And I think that that's the court shopping. And why does she have all of these cases in her courtroom? That's where I think the Supreme Court's really going to have to crack down. And they're not at this point. And it's very frustrating. Big Ho. So, Doc, do you think that when the Democrats and DSA lose a historic midterm, they'll go back to protest and rioting? You know how much we miss that so much. Yeah, but with what money? USAID got cut off, right? So very little money. Notice we don't see a lot of protesting anymore because so many of these organizations lost so many hundreds of millions of dollars. But yes, I would. Yeah, in the end, I'd prefer them yelling and screaming in the streets to actually governing for sure, or just being in halls of God. They never govern, but just being in positions of power. Love us, love our dogs. What a beautiful name there. People keep talking about Trump needed to declare national emergency, but he signed it yesterday. I don't know. Not sure. He signed an EO to change the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. But I did not catch that. I did not catch him signing the national emergency yesterday for elections, that is. Kevin, at what point should President Trump treat the federal courts the same way President Andrew Jackson did and just start ignoring them? Thought, well, yeah. No, but it's not. Yeah, it's not the 19th century anymore. That's the problem. The Republicans and I'm just Congress as a whole be under enormous public, that is media pressure, to hold him accountable. So he's got to be careful there. He does have some limitations, so he can't just ignore them. I think he can ignore these stupid little appellate courts decisions. I think he can, and in many ways they have, because they know either the Supreme Court's going to, they know they're going to overrule it eventually. So they just treat it, but they have to treat the court with as much respect as possible, because you have institutionalists like Roberts and Barrett who could push back on Trump if he too flagrantly ignores lower courts. In terms of ignoring the Supreme Court, I just the political fallout can be pretty rough there. Again, it's not the 19th century anymore. John Gotti, can Canada insert themselves in the midterms? I doubt it. I don't think there's going to be a lot that they can do. Cynthia, thanks for announcing arrested Democrats. Other video, you liked that video yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. The story writes itself. It's incredible. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen it, I think it was my first video yesterday morning on just all of these Democrats all across the country that are getting arrested, indicted, and convicted. It's pretty impressive. It's a very, very impressive list. MDE, we culture. I've been thinking of the dilemma the left has to address. We culture. They are horrible at building societies. They're too narcissistic. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very, very good point. They're too narcissistic. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very odd thing, because they're champions of collective identity. But in many respects, it seems to me it's a war against national identity, right? And for whatever reason, the full collective. And it's funny, I've heard it put this way, that at one point, the narcissistic liberal rebels at everything, even against their own individualism. It's a very interesting thing. They rebel against everything, even against their own individualism. Hence why they embrace collectivism. So the collectivism can be itself an expression of their own narcissistic rebellion against the world. So, but no, I mean, the left hasn't built. I mean, that's not true. The left did build the post-war consensus, in a sense. You could call it the left. I don't know if you could say they built it as much as they took it over. And of course, as a result, it fell. But no, everything woke collapses precisely because the left has just embraced absurdity. And when you embrace absurdity, reality will always win. There's no way around it. Unite it, glue. I hear the Supreme Court accepted a case that could end property tax based around fraud. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. So that would be very, very interesting. Again, I don't know if they would. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't comment one way or the other. I mean, it's very interesting. It seems to me, though, it may be understood under the federalist structure of our nation. So, in other words, it's property tax is an issue of states. If you don't like it, move to Florida. If you love it, move to where I grew up in Connecticut or Massachusetts or New Jersey. Alpacas offering collectivism. Kamilava. Oh, great. Larid. Professor, I didn't see Jesse Waters' interview with Comrade El Sayed, but did Jesse tell him to get ready to be accused of sexual deviancy? He would probably tell Mike Rogers to be on the lookout too. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I didn't watch, so I just watched clips of it. I mean, anyone who tells you that castration and circumcision are the same and then claims to be an MD should be in a padded room. I mean, that's like a haircut and decapitation. I think that's what the Babylon Bee talked about. I mean, that guy's a nut. He's an absolute nut. And, it's funny because he knows the woke support. I don't know if he's woke. This is the interesting thing. I don't know if the Islamic socialists are woke, but they know they need the woke to win. But it's interesting because the city council in Hamtramck, Michigan, all Muslim city councils right outside of Dearborn, one of the first orders of business was to ban the pride flag. So it's very interesting to see if he's just using wokeness to gain power. But I mean, again, the guy made some analogies that are beyond insane. P5, hey Doc, long time late to the meeting. What have I missed on Soros? Dude, by the way, China to lose population of France, I know, over the 8, that's right. So 8 to 10 years. So that's what I heard, 50 million, something akin to that. Oh, Favada, you got to go and watch it again. But bottom line, Treasury Department and the IRS are teaming up to remove his 501c3 tax status. And that means more or less gutting whatever remaining money he had after USAID gutted it. Movie erotic. Supporters not anti-JD. They skeptical because Tucker. Supporters not anti-JD are skeptical because of So there's people who are skeptical of JD are skeptical because of his relation to Tucker. For sure, but they tend to be people don't care about his relationship to Tucker, generally speaking, any more than they care about Trump's relationship to Tucker. You only care about it if Tucker's saying something that is radically offending you, and it tends to be his clearly anti-Israel, very virulently anti-Israel stance. So the anti-Israel crowd, I'm sorry, the pro-Israel crowd is trying to throw JD in with that and get Marco in instead. They just see him as safer, but they're not going to have any influence whatsoever on anything. That's the thing. I kind of shake my head at it. Just again, I think it's a kind of virtualism. Sam Rasha, question. The reason that Antifa not causing problems right now is because of, is it Doge? I think you meant Doge. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Absolutely. They got, it's that. They're also, I believe they're officially a terrorist organization. We've had our first Antifa thugs convicted in Texas as terrorists. So they'll be in prison for a long, long time. So yeah, no, that's what you do. You play hardball. You use the power, the political power that you've been given to destroy your political enemies. That's what you got to do, and stay in power as long as you can by rewarding your friends. Tubo, born and raised in Massachusetts, Iran still had capability. That's what Israel was talking about. Not that you didn't do what we wanted you to do. He just wasn't finished, period. And it turns out they were right. No, it doesn't turn out any. No. You don't see, this is Tuba. This is where I get a little frustrated with you OSINT folk, right? Open Source International folk. You think you have better intelligence than the president. You don't. This isn't, let me give you sort of a virtual slap here. You don't have better intelligence than the president. You don't. He knows what's going on. And then but he said he's telling you what he thinks. He is saying what he wants Iran to hear. He's not telling you the truth. This is politics, man. This is politics. He's telling you what you don't actually think he was sitting there. Do you actually think he's like, okay, they want to be my best friend now. Oh yeah, was it Iran still had the capability? That's what, yeah. No, they don't have the capability. They told me, Iran told me they don't have the capabilities anymore. Now we can be friends. Do you honest? I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but dude, there is a crowd out there that believes they have better intelligence and better decision-making skills than the president of the United States. Okay. Even with Biden, I had to watch out with this. Even with Biden, like with the disastrous pullout in Afghanistan, it was like, okay, what the hell just happened there? And then I had to look, and I looked at international news and so forth, and I had to try to piece together a pattern that says, all right, here's what I think actually happened. But what the crowd you're trying to defend does is they actually pretend they have better intel than the president does. And then they pretend that the president is saying things like he's a junior hire, like, oh yeah, no, but Timmy told me we're good. But then Timmy turned around and betrayed me. So now I have to smack Timmy around again. That's the web of rhetoric that surrounds what's actually going on right now. And I think we were very clear in our analysis of what Trump was doing. And if you go back to my videos, what was Trump doing? Two things. He was rearming, and he was giving the oil markets a little pause and a little relief. That's what he was doing. And then he was using some rhetoric that would relieve the energy markets, and possibly open up a little opportunity for Iran and the more amicable, if there is such a thing, negotiators within Iran to come on in and play ball to finally get a Venezuela-like situation. It didn't work, and no problem. Did we go home? Seriously, did we pack up our military and say, oh, we're done now? And did we go home? No, of course not. We're still there, stronger than ever. So that's, don't, stop pretending you just know more, because you don't. And it's very frustrating. Xeravan, thank you, Doc. I've learned a lot from you. What's the word for political evil? Ponerology. Poneros, or it's the study of evil. So poneros, Poneros, is the Greek word for evil. And then ponerology is the study of political evil, from Andrei Lobachevsky. And with that, gang, love you. Have a wonderful weekend. Remember, I am your back porch professor. If any breaking news happens, I will see you over the weekend. So stay on this channel all weekend. Love you guys. God bless.